Hi there, it's Matt here, and welcome back to the podcast. A quick word before we begin. This podcast is entirely separate from my role as a university professor. Everything I share with you here is my own scientific opinion, my own reading of the evidence, and it does not represent the position of my university or of any organization I'm affiliated with. What you'll hear is education, not medical advice. Now, as some of you know, every so often I like to step away from sleep and do one of those general brain episodes where we simply marvel at the strange and wonderful machine sitting inside your skull. And tonight is one of those episodes, because tonight I want to tell you about people who cannot recognize their own mother's or their husband's face, or even their own face in a mirror. And I want to convince you that these people are not curiosities to be pitied from a distance, but windows into the hidden machinery that builds the seamless, effortless reality you are experiencing right now. Let me start with a scene. A man is at a conference. He sees across the room a familiar face, a large beard, a slightly rumpled look, and he begins, instinctively, to compose himself to prepare a greeting. Then he realizes with a small private lurch that he is looking at his own reflection in a mirrored wall. He did not recognize himself. That man was the neurologist Oliver Sacks, one of the most celebrated chroniclers of the human brain who ever lived. And he himself had a lifelong condition that meant faces, including his own, simply would not stick. The condition is called prosopagnosia, from the Greek prosopon, face, and agnosia, not knowing, face blindness. And here is the first thing that makes it so revealing. The people who have it are not blind. Their eyes work perfectly. They can see a face in exquisite detail, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the texture of the skin. They can tell you it's a face. They can often tell you the emotion on it, whether it's happy or sad. What they cannot do is the one thing the rest of us do without a flicker of effort. Look at that arrangement of features and instantly know who it belongs to. Think about how astonishing that gap is. You walk into a crowded party and in a fraction of a second, faster than you can name it, you scan the room and pick out the three people you know, automatically, effortlessly, without trying. That recognition feels like seeing. It feels like one single, simple act. Tonight, I want to show you that it is not one act. It is a whole assembly line of separate processes, and prosopagnosia is what happens when one specific station on that line goes dark. So here's our map for the next half hour. I'm going to show you the actual piece of brain that does faces and what happens when it's damaged or simply built differently. Then I'll take you somewhere stranger, into a condition that is, in a sense, the photographic negative of face blindness, where the recognition works, but something else has been severed. And finally, I'll show you phantom limbs and people who can see without knowing they can see. Because once you start pulling on this thread, the entire comfortable illusion of a single, unified you begins to come apart in the most wonderful way. Let's begin with the hardware. For a long time, the idea that the brain might have a specific region dedicated just to faces sounded almost too neat to be true. Then brain imaging arrived and researchers found it. There is a patch of tissue on the underside of the brain in a fold called the fusiform gyrus that responds far more strongly to faces than to almost anything else, to houses, to objects, to scrambled images. They called it the fusiform face area. A specialized module, a dedicated face recognition engine sitting in roughly the same place in brain after brain after brain. And that single discovery reframes everything. Because if there is a specific piece of machinery for faces, then there can be a specific failure of faces. Damage that fusiform region, often on the right side, with a stroke or a head injury, and a person can lose the ability to recognize faces while the rest of their vision sails on untouched. This is acquired prosopagnosia. One day, you can recognize your children. A small injury to one specific fold of tissue, and the next day, you cannot. Everything else about your sight is fine. Only that one exquisite talent is gone. But here's what genuinely surprised the field. Prosopagnosia isn't always something you lose. For a great many people, it's something they were simply born with. A brain that from the very start never wired up that face engine properly. This is developmental or congenital prosopagnosia, and these people often have no idea they're different. How would they? They have nothing to compare their experience to. They assume everyone is secretly using the same desperate tricks they use, the haircut, the voice, the glasses, the particular coat, to tell people apart. And how common do you think that is? 1 in 10,000? 1 in 1,000? When researchers went looking systematically, the number they landed on was around 2.5% of people. Let that sink in. That's roughly 1 in 40, which means, statistically, in a school, in an office, on a busy bus, there are people all around you right now who cannot reliably recognize faces and who have quietly built an entire scaffolding of compensations so that you would never, ever know. They've been faking it gracefully their whole lives. To even measure this properly, scientists had to build careful tests, stripping away all the cheats, no hair, no glasses, no context, just the bare face, asking people to learn and then recognize it. And those tests revealed something important. Developmental prosopagnosia is a real, specific, measurable deficit. Not shyness, not being bad with names. A genuine, lifelong difference in one precise cognitive ability, often running in families, hinting at something written in the genes. And here's a delicious twist before we go deeper. If face recognition is a specific dialable talent that some people are born with too little of, then logically, somewhere out there should be people born with too much. And there are. We call them super recognizers, people who essentially never forget a face, who can pick out, in a crowded station, the stranger who served them a coffee once, years ago, in a different city. Most of them learn to keep quiet about it because saying, "I know exactly where I've seen you before," tends to make you sound less gifted and more unnerving. Some police forces have started actively recruiting these people, using their almost uncanny gift to match grainy security footage to real faces, a human ability that for now still beats much of the software. And here's the point. Prosopagnostics at one end, super recognizers at the other, and the rest of us strung out along the curve between them. Face recognition isn't a switch that's simply on or off. It's a spectrum, one human ability that nature dials up and down from person to person, like height, like musical pitch, and most of us will never know where we sit on it. We just quietly assume everyone sees what we see. So for, it must be at least a decade now, I have been an avid, probably more like rabid consumer of protein shakes. But the hard thing, honestly, in the supplement space, if you really understand and do your diligence, is this critical thing called trust. It is very hard to find a brand that you can truly trust. That's when I came across the company Puri and the really impressive founder. Even though I'm sure it makes them less profit versus other quick and loose companies, Puri takes quality more seriously than any company I've ever seen before. They have so many offerings, protein powders galore, but lots of other additions. But that's what I was focusing on here. Why did I choose them? Well, it's really for 4 specific reasons. Number 1, they are free from hormones. Number 2, they are free from GMOs. Number 3, they are free of any pesticides. And number 4, and this is the critical confidence part, every single batch is third-party tested for over 200 harmful contaminants, things like heavy metals, etc. All you have to do if you are a neurotic nerd like me, you can even scan the QRI code on the back of the product to get the third-party independent laboratory test results. That's how much trust and confidence they place in their product. By the way, if you want a recommendation, go for the dark chocolate flavored protein powder. It's just exceptional. In fact, it's wonderfully addictive. I didn't just say that. Anyway, it delivers 21 grams of protein per serving. And for folks of my podcast right now, you can save 20%. So go over to peori.com/Matt Walker, and that is spelled PUORI.com, Matt Walker. So again, that is PUORI.com/Matt Walker, and you will get 20% off your product. Now, I want to take you to the strangest, most beautiful finding in all of this, because you'd assume that a prosopagnosic looking at their spouse feels nothing of recognition at all, a blank, a stranger. But when researchers wired some of these patients up to measure the body's automatic responses, the subtle changes in the skin that betray emotional arousal, and showed them faces, something extraordinary happened. To familiar faces, their bodies responded, the skin reacted, the unconscious systems lit up with recognition, while the conscious person, the one doing the looking, still insisted truthfully, "I have no idea who this is." Stop and feel the vertigo of that. Part of their brain recognized the beloved face perfectly well and quietly sounded the bell of familiarity in the body. But that knowledge never reached the conscious self. There was recognition with nobody home to receive it. This tells us that knowing a face is not one thing, but at least two: a conscious identification and an unconscious emotional flagging, and that these two streams run on separate tracks that can be torn apart. And the moment you understand that those two streams can come apart, you are ready for the photographic negative I promised you, a condition where the conscious recognition works perfectly, but the emotional stream has been cut. It is called the Capgras delusion, and it is one of the eeriest things the human brain can do. A person with Capgras looks at their mother, their husband, their child. They recognize the face perfectly. They can see it is, in every visible detail, their mother. And yet they become utterly, unshakably convinced that this person is an imposter, a duplicate, a replacement, an exact look-alike who has somehow taken the real person's place. They are not confused about what their mother looks like. They are certain this is not her. For a long time, this was filed away as pure psychiatric madness, a story the mind tells. But a more elegant and more neurological explanation was offered. Remember our two streams, conscious face recognition and the unconscious wave of emotional warmth that normally arrives with a loved one's face. Now imagine the recognition stream is intact, but the connection to the emotional stream, the path to the brain's feeling centers, has been severed. What would that feel like from the inside? You would look at your mother, you would see consciously that it is your mother, every feature correct. But the warmth, the automatic glow of familiarity that has accompanied her face your entire life, would be missing, gone. And your brain, confronted with that impossible contradiction, looks exactly right, but feels completely wrong, would reach for the only explanation that reconciles the two. This looks like my mother, but it doesn't feel like her. Therefore, it cannot really be her. It must be an imposter. The delusion is not stupidity. It is the brain doing its best to make sense of a signal that has been quietly, catastrophically cut. The logic is, in its own broken way, flawless. Do you see what these two mirror image conditions, prosopagnosia and Capgras, are teaching us together? They are proving that the single, simple feeling of "I know you" is in fact stitched together in real time from multiple separate threads. Pull out the conscious recognition thread and you get face blindness with the emotional bell still ringing underneath. Cut the emotional thread instead, and you get a perfectly recognized face that feels like a fraud. The seamless experience was never seamless. It was always an assembly. We just never get to see the seams until the brain shows them to us. And once you've grasped that your unified reality is a construction stitched from parts, you start to see this principle everywhere in neurology. So let me take you to the body itself and to one of the most haunting examples of all, the phantom limb. A person loses an arm to an accident, to surgery, and yet for a long time afterward, Often for years, they can still feel it vividly. The arm that is no longer there, they feel its position. Sometimes they feel it move. And cruelly, many feel pain in it, a clenching, a cramping, an itch they can never scratch in a hand that does not exist. How can you feel agony in a limb that is gone? The answer is that your arm does not really live in your arm. It lives in your brain. You carry a complete map of your body inside your head, a neural model, and that map does not simply vanish when the limb does. The territory on the map, deprived of its real arm, keeps right on representing it, keeps insisting it is there. The phantom is the map, still drawing a limb that the world has erased. And from that insight came one of the most ingenious, almost mischievous treatments in all of medicine. If the brain is generating pain because its map is confused, then perhaps you can fix the map by fooling it. So researchers built a simple box with a mirror. The patient places their intact arm beside the mirror so that its reflection appears exactly where the missing arm should be. They look down and they see two arms again. They move the real hand and watch the reflected phantom move in perfect time. And in many cases, the brain, suddenly receiving visual proof that the lost limb is present and obeying, relaxes. The clenched phantom unclenches. The pain eases. A mirror, a box, and a trick of the eye reaching in to soothe a hand that isn't there. If that doesn't make you marvel at the brain, I'm not sure what will. Let me give you one final example, because it may be the most philosophically dizzying of them all. There are people who are, by every standard test, blind in part of their visual field. Damage to the visual cortex, the part of the brain that produces conscious seeing. Show them an object in that blind region, and they will tell you, honestly, that they see nothing. There is nothing there, just absence. And then you ask them to guess. You say, I know you can't see it, but humor me. Is the line tilted left or right? Reach toward where it might be. And astonishingly, they guess right far more often than chance allows. They can point to a light they swear they cannot see. They can post a card through a slot whose angle they insist they cannot perceive. This is called blindsight. Vision without the experience of seeing. Sight that reaches the hands and the behavior, but never reaches the conscious self. How? Because there is more than one visual pathway in the brain. The newer route gives us conscious, vivid seeing, the picture in your head. But there are older, deeper routes, evolutionary antiques, that route visual information to action without ever generating the experience of sight. In blindsight, the conscious route is destroyed, but an ancient one survives, quietly steering the body using information the person genuinely does not know they possess. There is seeing happening with, again, nobody home to witness it. Okay, so I have a slightly strange invitation for you. Tonight, before you brush your teeth, turn the tube around and actually read the label, because most of us have become fairly thoughtful about what we eat, what we drink, and what we put into our bodies. But then twice a day, every day, we put toothpaste in our mouths without giving the ingredient list a second thought. That was the thing that made me pause. Redmond Leaf is a toothpaste I really like and has become a household standard because it takes a much simpler mineral-based approach. It is fluoride-free and made without artificial flavors, dyes, or harsh chemicals. Instead of fluoride, it uses microhydroxyapatite, a mineral naturally found in tooth enamel and used in oral care to help support enamel strength. It also includes Redmond bentonite clay for gentle polishing, plus xylitol and erythritol for natural sweetness. And importantly, it still feels like real toothpaste, smooth, creamy, fresh, not gritty or strange, which is why it is easy to keep using. It comes in wild mint, citrus rosemary, and orange vanilla. My personal favorite is wild mint. It's pitch perfect in terms of the flavoring. So, ladies and gentlemen, all you need to do is go to redmond.life/Walker and use code WALKER to get 15% off your first order. That's redmond.life/walker, code walker, for 15% off your first order. I really do recommend giving them a try. I promised you that once we pulled on this thread, the whole tapestry would come loose. So let me show you a few more conditions. Quickly, each one taking a faculty you assume is simple and revealing it as a separate, breakable machine. Start with color. We think of color as simply out there, a property of the world our eyes passively receive. It is not. Color is manufactured inside your head by specific circuits comparing wavelengths of light, and those circuits can fail on their own. There are people who, after a brain injury, suddenly lose all color. Not blurred, not faded, but gone. The entire world collapsing into shades of gray like a black and white film. And the horror is total. Food looks gray and revolting. A loved one's skin looks leaden. A sunset becomes a streak of dirty ash. Their eyes are perfect. The color-making machine in the brain has simply switched off, exiling them into a gray world no one around them can see. Now take something even more basic, the simple act of seeing an object and knowing what it is. There are patients, intelligent, articulate, whose eyes work flawlessly, who can describe every individual feature of a thing in precise detail, yet cannot assemble those features into a recognizable whole. Handed a glove, such a person might describe a continuous surface enfolded on itself with 5 outpouchings and still not be able to say it is a glove. In the most famous case in all of neurology, a cultured music teacher on his way out of a consulting room reached out, took hold of his own wife's head, and tried to lift it onto his own because he had mistaken her for his hat. He saw every detail. He grasped no meaning. The raw data of vision arrived intact, but the step that turns seeing into recognizing had been quietly cut. And one last vertiginous example. Take motion. Surely motion is just a series of still frames the brain plays in sequence. No, motion too is its own dedicated perception with its own circuitry, and it too can fail alone. There are rare patients with motion blindness who see the world as a series of frozen snapshots. One such woman found pouring a cup of tea terrifying. The liquid appeared frozen in midair like a glacier, and then, with no movement in between, the cup was suddenly overflowing. Crossing a road became potentially deadly. A car far away in one instant, then, with nothing in between, right upon her. She could see the world perfectly. She simply could not see it move. Color, objects, motion, faces, each one feels from the inside like a single, seamless part of just seeing. Each one is, in truth, a separate machine, and each can shatter on its own, leaving all the others humming along untouched. And if you think these are only failures of the senses, here is one that fractures something deeper still, the sense of space and even of your own body. After certain strokes to the right side of the brain, people develop what's called hemispatial neglect. They don't go blind on the left, their eyes are fine. They simply stop believing the left half of the universe exists. They eat the food on the right side of the plate and leave the left untouched, genuinely puzzled when you rotate the plate and more food appears from nowhere. They shave or apply makeup to only the right side of the face. Some, looking at their own left arm lying in the bed beside them, will insist sincerely that it is not theirs, that someone has put a stranger's limb in their bed. It isn't that they cannot see the left. It is that the very concept of left has dropped out of their world so completely that they cannot even notice it is missing. You cannot search for what your brain no longer has a category to hold. And then, for balance, a condition that is not a breaking, but an extra joining, synesthesia. For some people, the senses are cross-wired in a way that adds rather than subtracts. They may see specific colors when they hear musical notes or experience every number and letter as having its own intrinsic color. The 5 always forest green, the 7 always a deep red, vivid, automatic, and stable, across an entire lifetime. For a long time, this was waved away as mere imagination or metaphor. It is neither. It is a real, measurable, consistent difference in how their brains bind information. Two streams that, in most of us, run in separate channels wired into one. And it's a lovely reminder that the assembly we've been describing all night is not fixed. In some minds, the seams are not torn. They are stitched into unusual, beautiful new patterns. So let me gather all of this together, because by now I hope you can feel the single profound idea threading through every one of these conditions. We move through our days with a powerful, unshakable conviction that we are a single, unified self, smoothly perceiving a single, unified world. That when we recognize a friend, it is one act. That when we feel our own body, it is simply obviously there. That when we see, we see. These conditions, prosopagnosia, Capgras, the phantom limb, blindsight, are nature's way of taking that conviction apart gently and showing us the truth underneath. The truth is that the self and the world you experience are constructed, assembled moment by moment by dozens of specialized processes working in parallel, most of them entirely beneath your awareness. The seamlessness is the brain's greatest magic trick, and these patients are the ones who accidentally got to see behind the curtain. This was the gift of Oliver Sacks, the man who didn't know his own reflection. He understood that the person with the strange neurological condition is not a freak in a sideshow, but a teacher, that each one reveals by its very breakage a hidden law of how all of us are built. He treated each patient as a complete human being first and a window second, and never, ever the other way around. And there is something quietly moving in the fact that this great explorer of the broken brain was himself, all his life, walking past his own friends in the street, unable to recognize their faces. So here is what I'd ask you to carry out of tonight. The next time you glance across a room and instantly know the face of someone you love, the next time you feel your own two hands resting in your lap, the next time you simply open your eyes and the whole world is just there, effortless and obvious and free. I hope you'll feel a flicker of something close to awe, because none of it is simple. All of it is built. A vast, silent, brilliant assembly is running underneath every ordinary second of your life, and it almost never breaks. And in the rare, extraordinary people for whom one small piece does break, we get to glimpse the staggering hidden machinery that holds the rest of us together. Thanks so much again for listening. Marvel at your own mind. Be gentle with the people whose machinery works differently. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.